And it's great that we are meeting here. And I think it's very important, as Audrey said, like, especially around SMEs and smaller companies, founders and all. But really, this discussion that I wanted to raise today is in general for all the companies, especially for business leaders, founders, CTOs, even the developers, like, who are working with AI. And I think it's super, super important because, like, it's about compliance, it's about AI governance. But from the perspective, my lens is through building the trust really in AI and in the products that the companies have. So pretty much what to expect from this session is really like a helicopter view. I don't have a chance to go through, like, it's only 1 hour, so like I would love to go through like deeper into that. But my goal really was, when I was planning this session today, really to give you a hints of different regions, to show you some patterns and some perspective of how it works, and not necessarily answer all the questions. So you may have more even questions after that session. And I think it's a good thing if we have more questions than when we arrived, actually. But it won't be comprehensive. It won't be like a complete session on that. It will just show you some samples and examples and or aspects of the global governance and regulations sector or market as we see it. I would like us to start, or maybe before that, I'll say a little bit about myself. So I work with AI for many years now, even before really that was called AI. It was mostly about data management or data science, machine learning, all that aspects that are becoming very popular in social media and other called AI nowadays. So I have many years of working already in the projects related to that. I spent years and years in regulated environments, especially in healthcare, aviation, education, working for top clients and top companies, like whether I was hired by them or I was working as a consultant, because I was working for many years as well as a consultant, working on projects for the clients. I have over like 50 projects already. Some of them they were short, some of them were bigger and longer, but most of them they were related to software development and data management across mostly UK and Ireland and USA. So I was always working very closely with the development team and with the business team. And because of that, I was always a translator of the data governance as well. And because I was working mostly as a data product manager, so I was working with product development itself. I was working as a product owner, so very close with the teams and people, engineers who are having hands-on and developing the products, but also working with different other teams who are having an impact of how the product will look like, especially legal teams. So I have a deep background with data governance, GDPR, privacy by design, security by design, like all that sort of things. And what I have now is a company, Anna August Advisory, where I support companies as a trainer, where I support companies as well as an auditor. And with auditor, I mean both aspects of AI compliance dedicated to regulations and standards, and also as the general design of the AI governance. And I work across markets as UK, mostly UK, European Union, and GCC. And on top of that, I have a PhD as well, and I spent years, like 6 years, on teaching, lecturing at universities and doing the research. So I'm coming from a very various and diverse, let's say, environments and backgrounds, and I think it's an added value. And what I do at the moment, which is the auditor part, is really helping me with all the experience that I gained through the years, and kind of like, help me to become this bridge of communication and bridge of collaboration between different departments and different companies and different needs. So I think it's a very added value with my set of skills and experience that I had kind of gained. Okay, so let's go now into the hot topic itself, which is the compliance and governance. But before that, I just want to emphasize one thing, that this webinar is really about building the trust. And I see AI nowadays as a, like, the most important aspect in developing AI is like developing it with having trust in mind, having the trust as the cornerstone of the organizational kind of strategy and mindset. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I met with a client as a business opportunity, and throughout the meeting, I had no idea if that meeting is actually not a deep fake meeting. And I had no idea if this person on the other side, it was an online meeting, of course, was the real person. And I kind of got suspicious, and I couldn't kind of get to the end of the conversation feeling that it was truly a man. Like, there was some certain way he talked, the way he answered questions, the way he moved, like, that there was something there that I wasn't sure. And the problem was not really like, one thing was whether I could decide or kind of like came to terms like, or check whether that was true or not. It was more about like, was it trustworthy? Like, how did it feel for me as a person on the other side? And I must tell you that I dropped that opportunity just because the trust was lost. I couldn't believe, I didn't know if that was there still. I mean, as a human being was on the other side, or it was just kind of like, something artificial. And I think that's all that like brings back to the AI nowadays. AI is like growing so fast, and every day we have so many new launches, so many new products released on the market, and people, just like end users of those applications, are overwhelmed with it. And like, how to build actually somebody who is sustainable, who stays with you for longer, if not through trust, pretty much. Because for me, the customer, the end user, can come to you, and like, basically AI is based on subscription nowadays. And yes, they can come, its subscription is instant, but if you don't invest in building that trust with your product, the users, you will lose that over time. Because if the users are not having this feeling of having the requirements, that it's something that is super important for them, like consistency, right? Like transparency, like accountability, like control, like all those aspects that will keep them loyal and stay for longer. It doesn't matter how great your product is. And the products, some AI products are amazing, but like, if you cannot keep the trust, it means that you, over time, you won't build a relationship, and relationship is built on trust. So for me, that's like a key to understand how to develop AI, is through trust, basically. And the companies who are not following that from day one, not after you launch, but like actually from day one, before you even release it to public, like, you need to incorporate that philosophy or approach, let's say. And actually, compliance and regulations are trying to help us with this. And what we will see soon, I'll show you, is basically everything that the world is talking, and the global regulations are talking, is about how to define the trustworthy AI and how it should look like in practice. And before we'll go deep dive into the local and regional regulations, I just wanted to emphasize that all that jurisdictions that are actually taking place now in the world. They all started with the international conversations and global, like, governance bodies kind of discuss the ethical aspects of AI in the past. And those on the left side, you have those global foundations that were raised few years back, and we have UNESCO that was super important for the recommendation on the ethics of AI in 2021. OECD as well with their AI principles. Then we have the European Union high-level expert group and their ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI in 2019. All those institutions and international bodies, they were discussing AI from a very high-level perspective, like sort of like, just giving us the guidelines, giving the recommendations, but they were all based on something that I call a 7 core ethical pillars. And this is something I developed as part of my framework when I work with companies in audits, basically. And those are the analysis that I did, that basically they have maybe different names, different terminology, but they are all surrounded, evolving around those 7 ethical pillars, which are the human oversight, which are technical safety, data privacy, transparency, fairness, social impact, and accountability. Why am I talking about it? Because later on we'll see that all that transferred, not like, from that high level into regions and jurisdictions, into actually practical requirements, technical requirements. So they are coming from the ethical point of view, but they are not values. They are actually only values. I mean, they are actually going deeper into, as I said, technical requirements. And that's super important to understand, because it's not about system safety anymore. It's not only about the data. It is super important, but we need to understand that all the regulations that we're having in place, they are different from the previous, let's say, IT sort of regulations that may have been in the past. So we need to keep that in mind. And we'll get back to that. So when we talk about regulations, so we have 2 aspects of it. One side is the international certification standards, right, that we may have. And the other one is the regulations of the nations, regions, and so on. So I'll start with the certification part, because this is something that actually tells a little bit and helps companies to come up to speed, like with their AI governance management, like, from within the international standards. And sometimes, and actually quite often, it is something that it's helping the companies to understand and map out, basically, and help them manage the company inside, not focusing on the regulations itself. And so why would it be great to consider certification at all? So there are several aspects, several good benefits for that. First of all, thanks to that, thanks to having the certification in place in-house, you're actually making the sales and getting the bigger clients, or like, for example, if you're selling your products to enterprise clients, it's actually sometimes in some sectors it's required to have some sort of certification, or it actually speeds out pretty much, like, the very fast the sales cycle, or helping winning the contracts, because all you have to do is just show the report of the certification that you have, and there is no need for analysis and additional work, sending out, like, from those clients, from other bodies, like, the people, or ask to your company and to ask questions and so on and so forth, and doing the analysis on their own. It also, like, lowers the cyber insurance costs. It shows, but it's also like very, very beneficial for the internal kind of like maturity. It shows where your organization is in terms of AI, and it shows to show you the gaps and the problems, things that may not be kind of taken care of. Above all, also, it helps you to understand and reduce the risk and costs of incidents. So we need to remember that trust is built until the first incident happens. So what happens if the data leaks out, or what happens if this, like quite often the reputation of the company is being completely destroyed just by one incident. So having the certification is actually helping you to diagnose and see that gaps or things or risks being taken care of sooner. Yeah, and what is also important, and we need to take and have in mind as well for the startups especially, that nowadays certification and also the compliance itself is becoming like an argument or a question during the due diligence, and especially Series A. When you have the government's report in place, you are ahead of the others. So like quite often the investors are starting to ask about it, and it is your a great benefit to your idea. So let's look at those certification standards that we may have. So there are two main ones, internationally recognizable. So we have ISO 27K and ISO 42K. So they are not similar, they are not they are complementary to each other, but they are not overlapping that much, let's say this way. So ISO 27 is an information security, and it is pretty much about the safety of your system and data. It does not replace kind of like, it supports, or maybe this way, it supports GDPR requirements. It's not replacing it, of course, right? Because like this is the standard, international standard certification. So it is still, it is not compliance. It just supports to show that the compliance is possible to achieve, right? So it doesn't require that many people involved. It does not restructure how the business operates. And I'm still talking about the ISO 27K. But it does not explain or cover if AI is fair. Is it explainable? Does it have a human oversight? All that sort of the biases. Those things are not there because it's all about safety of the data and safety of the systems. While when we look at the ISO 42K, this is a relatively new standard. It was released in October, I believe, 2023. And it is AI management system. So this one is really good for the companies who are dealing with AI, and it helps organizations to identify, assess, govern all those AI-related risks as part of that system framework. This includes, especially those aspects that make decisions that affect people, right? Like fairness, explainability, bias mitigation. All those aspects are covered there. And what is also interesting, and I find it very useful, and I can see that companies are really choosing that one. With time, I can see more and more companies interested in incorporating that into their strategy in business development, is that ISO 42K supports the European Union market, as we will talk about AI Act later on, but it greatly goes into many AI Act requirements as well, especially when we are talking about the QMS, quality management system. It supports the policies, the risk assessment, audit logs, decision records. So this is a great complementary kind of to prepare your organization for the AI Act itself. And what is important as well, the ISO 42K, it touches every team, every systems and that you are using within the company itself. So it involves different people, different departments like product, data science, legal, HR, all that people, and it is not really like ISO 27 sometimes is treated like really like an IT project, like, you know, another thing to work on. ISO 42K is more about the C-suite project. So it's not an IT, it is about like, you know, operational, business operational with that terms. So, but like this, what it doesn't do, it doesn't cover like the data infrastructure from external threats. So it doesn't replace the legal, of course, like counsel for the jurisdiction specific AI law. So as I said that already, like, so yeah, and it is in general, because it involves so many people, it involves so many decisions to be made, sometimes redesigning completely the structure and how we perceive and how we document and how we work with AI. It might be very time consuming and resource intensive exercise as well to fulfill. However, I think it's greatly beneficial and it should be definitely considered. So when the companies are coming to me and asking, like, you know, which should we do, and like, you know, should we do one or another, or like, you know, what is the sequence of those, I always recommend that first do the ISO 27K and then do the 42. You can do it simultaneously, but like, you know, quite often it's good, and it depends where are you, how mature your product is, of course. But like, you know, it's good to think about those two, especially that the regulation market is very tricky at the moment, and it's not everywhere as strict or hard as it will be in the future. And those are a great starting point to be ahead of others, let's say other companies, and build on top of it as the regulations will come stronger in the future. So this is a great aspect. There is also one regulation that it's not regulation, but one standard that it's coming from the US audience, and it is a SOC 2, but like it is similar to ISO, especially ISO 27K. And it is very recognizable in the US market. It is not very much asked about in Europe. It is issued by the CPA auditing firms, and it's not a certificate, but it is attestation. So like, you know, this is something to keep in mind. It's based on 5 trust service criteria. The security is mandatory. Quite often the companies are taking the security and availability, because the rest, the next ones, the processing integrity, confidentiality, privacy, they are mostly they are optional. And so this how the mostly companies, especially SaaS companies, are going to. There are 2 types of that SOC. I mean, there are 2, let's say, sequences of following the SOC 2, which is type 1 and type 2. It is a standard that requires some time. It may take 6 to 12 months or even longer to produce the report and feel for attestation. And it is quite, as I said already, a US standard. So if your company is thinking about going to the US, you may kind of considering, like, you may consider thinking about SOC 2. But if you have already ISO 27K, then that's already a good start, and you might be presenting the findings, the report from the ISO 27, because pretty much they cover the SOC 2 and ISO 27K, they cover 60 to 70% of controls, they overlap. So that's great, but it does not complement the 42K. So like, you know, if you are in the States, like, the great is to have the ISO 42K, for example, and SOC 2, or ISO 27K and ISO 42K. So that's that. Okay, so now we're going to the compliance itself. And that's a funny slide, because I put it together because I was thinking, like, should I give the benefits of why to follow the compliance, which is obvious, right? Like, the compliance is about following the rules and following the regulations, and we have to listen to it, and that's it, right? Well, it's not that obvious with the AI as of yet, because it is still, there are some regions, there's some markets that are not really having hard laws on AI. And it sometimes, for me, it looks like a gold rush, really, in the 19th century in California or wherever, like, that it was all about like whoever goes first or do this or whatever. There is no law yet implied, and sometimes it happens that it's so blurred and so difficult for the companies to understand how to follow, what to do, that actually this slide, I think, makes sense, because we'll see there are regions who are very strict and becoming very strict, but there are some that are really like, yeah, like wild west almost. So what's the benefits really of, like, when you start the compliance early? I think, the best is basically to start as soon as possible. Don't wait for the compliance and regulations to kind of be set in stone and decided, because if you start already now, before something like, will be signed or strictly decided, you're already ahead, and you already decide changing the how the system works within your company, and how AI is responding, and what is the risk management, all that sort of things. You are actually supporting much earlier, and that's a great benefit, because it might be very pricey to retrofit against the law. And so I think it's smart to be ahead and think about it sooner than later. Second of all, like, you're building something for long term, and with that, trust comes. And like, if you have the compliance in place, it means that the users, clients, they can trust you. They can have the answers to their questions. If you take care of the transparency, for example, they will know, they will understand how is their data used, how do they use this tool, and where is the impact, what is the impact of how they're using it, pretty much. Sorry, I'm just wondering here. But yeah, but like, basically, what is important, that the reputation is not something that you build overnight. Reputation is something that you gain through the time, and sometimes it's so easy to lost, like in a very single incident. But again, if you have the compliance in place, first of all, the incidents will be much less and much less harmful, and will be so much better for the end users as well. There are operational benefits as well, for better system, better, clearer ownership. It's just for your own internal operations, like, having those documentation, having the testing in place, having monitoring, that improves the AI quality. As I mentioned a few times already, having those problems identified become before they become incidents, and making, like, a clear accountability within the organization about the decisions of AI. But there are also like financial aspects to the compliance, and when you are not following them, it may actually be very costly for you. There are some kind of fines in AI Act that are saying that they can be as high as 35 million, or 7% of global annual turnover. This is the max. Of course, there are others. You will see that soon after. But like, what is important is that if you will be charged for, it's not only a question, oh, I'll fix it, but there will financial kind of fines that you may suffer from it. So like, that's really worth taking consideration of. Of course, as I mentioned as well, like, that lowers the cyber insurance premiums as well, and so on and so forth. And there is also the benefit of the access and competitive advantage, something that I already mentioned as well, with the international standards. Like, this, you actually show to the public, you show to the end users, but you also show to your clients, and that you are competitive, that you are ahead of the times, and that you are willing to take what it takes to be trustworthy, pretty much. And you're getting the stronger position, especially nowadays, if you are working with, you're looking for procurements from the public sector. This is like a game changer if you follow that and you can document that. Okay, so we have the AI Act. This is a very this is the first, like, most comprehensive AI regulation, and it is not final. There is so many ambiguities within it, and still not clarified many aspects. But what is the most important aspects is that it doesn't matter where your company is based. If your AI affects European Union residents, if the output of the AI as a result of the AI work is used in the European Union, then AI Act, you fall into the regulation of the European Union AI Act. And in terms of the deadlines and the time we have this coming August 2026, which is not that long from now, when we will have the full application of high risk AI systems obligation here. And we will talk later on what's the high risk and all. But there is this ongoing conversation where it's feasible, because like now most of the companies are not ready, and also the AI Act, as I said, so has so many gaps and ambiguities that it may kind of cause actually that it will be prolonged. The date might change to December 2027, but the discussion is in place, and it probably won't happen until August, until we reach the deadline. So it is still in place. It is still valid, and we need to follow according to that. You have also the information what it really means if you don't comply, and it is about, like, the fines it all and all, but also it may mean that the market ban, there will be a possibility for authorities that they can prohibit and restrict deployment entirely from within the region. What I find very interesting, and I think worth saying, is that how it is actually enforced. Okay, so like we have actually aspects of two. So at the central level, there is and there will be a European Union AI office, and that will be like a central watchdog, like that will be overseeing all those kind of all models, coordinates the cross-border enforcements, like the trainings, kind of overseeing the national MSAs, but the actual work and control and monitor and inspect will be happening with national MSAs, which is market surveillance authorities. So there will be, and this is very important to understand, that this AI Act is a preventive model, which means that the national MSAs, they may just show up on the site. They can come to your company unexpected, and like, they didn't have to make an appointment and inform you about it. They can just come and check whether you are compliant with AI Act. And this is what strikes and why it's so different, because as you will see, other regulations and other regions are more about actually a reactive approach. Like, so it means, like, if the incident happened, then we will send the control and inspect. But like with AI Act is that it may happen without even any incident happening, any sort of leakage, any sort of issues. So we need to keep that in mind and act accordingly. One thing also, that AI Act is not only one thing that is working from within European Union. There is also other aspects in force, like NIS2 or DORA, and we need to consider them as well, depending on what sort of business you're doing. If it's like, for example, there is a NIS2 is the cybersecurity for critical sectors, or DORA is mostly in finance, but for their vendors as well. So that's also very important. So you need to keep an eye on that. And as you will see, we are just building up, because as long as you are just a small company that is helping the local communities, I don't know, somewhere in Scotland, that's one thing. it's great. But if you are a company that is thinking about scaling and is thinking about developing and growing, it means that you're thinking about other regions as well. And then what then? Like, you have to comply with all those regions. And within those regions, you have different regulations and you have to comply with them as well. Okay, so going further, what does it actually regulate? What does it mean, the AI Act, really? So the biggest differentiation and biggest kind of aspect to talk about is that AI Act, it classifies you as whether you are a provider or a deployer, meaning that whether you build AI or you use AI built by others. You might be both, you might be just one. Your obligations and all that is changing and is different depending on this role, on this answer that you will give. And you need to understand then what are the obligations, what are the requirements, how do I fulfill regarding what it is. There are 4 tiers of risk classification in that AI Act, and prohibited, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. And this is something that I said, like, that in August 2026, we will have the high risk tier, and all the companies that are falling into that, they need to fulfill the requirement. High risk covers hiring, credit, education, healthcare, law enforcement, critical infrastructure. But like what is very important, and that's also quite often happens to me, like when I talk with clients, they're saying, oh, we are not a healthcare company, or we are not education company, so we are fine. It doesn't mean that way, because it's not about your company, what sector you're working in, is about what system, in what system you're using your AI. Meaning that you may be a completely like harmless, let's say no high regulated company, but you bought the HR AI system that helps you to recruit people to your company. And that already means that you are high risk. So you need to kind of follow the requirements for that tier. So we need to understand it's all about the systems from within the company and not about the sector that the company is working in itself. Yeah, so about that, we need to understand that those high risk systems, they require the risk management throughout the whole life cycle, the data governance for the training data, that's super important. The training data compliance and regulation around that is very important and needs to be still clarified about certain things. But yeah, technical documentation, automation logging, transparency to user, human oversight, mechanisms that are built into architecture. So what does it mean really for the companies? Well, it means that basically you need to do the conformity assessment. You need to check whether you are a high risk company. It has to happen one by one company. If you are, then you have to register in the European Union AI database. You have to have the documentation and monitoring maintained and updated throughout the system's life, not just like a one-time exercise. So it's not, I've done it once and that's it. No, you have to keep monitoring that and updating and checking. As even the next point is saying, like post-market monitoring, like, you need to have ability of your system to monitor those deployed systems and be sure that this doesn't affect people at all. And you have to be able to explain that as well. So there are also like prohibited practices that were already in place from February 2025, but they are like mostly about social scoring, real-time biometrics, all that, like, everything that talks or is about AI that manipulates people below their awareness, all that sort of things are already prohibited in the European Union. Okay, what about the UK AI governance? So this is slightly, like, I wouldn't say slightly, it's deliberately different from the European Union. So first of all, there is no single AI Act. UK decided that, like, we are not going with the horizontal AI legislation. We are going like with whatever the sectoral regulation have. We will apply AI principles on top of it, but we will leave the sectors or regulations in those sectors to actually address AI, address those requirements. So we have FCA for finance, we have ICO for data, Ofcom for media, CMA for competition. So as you can see, it's really like a patchwork regulation in UK. But they have published these 5 cross-sector principles, which are the safety, transparency, fairness, accountability, contestability. Yeah, of course, I took that into consideration of 7 core ethical pillars as well. There is also an updated data protection framework was in June 2025 through the Data Use and Access Act. It builds on top of the UK GDPR, and it is relevant, especially for AI companies. But it's helping. Like, I think UK AI governance is still sort of like everywhere in the world, like something that it is work on, it's not yet decided. And I presume that the regulations in the UK will harden with time. For now, it is what it is, and we just need to follow with that. But what does it mean? So for companies, it's a bit messy at the moment. And when I talk with them, that's why they are the most confused, because they don't understand if it is required from them or not. There are those principles, but then there are certain domains, and then how does it work if I work cross domains, and what should I do? So it is tricky, and it's very difficult sometimes to track all the regulations that are needed. Nonetheless, it is required, and the company should be following that. But what it also means that quite often the companies are moving into those international standards, and is following that sort of already recognizable standards that can fulfill the gap that they are finding in the UK market at the moment. Yeah, so as I said, the standards are more like a market requirements, and that's really something that is also adding to that compliance itself as well. Yeah. Yeah, UK, as I said, they are moving toward the binding legislation more, especially around frontier models. There is this comprehensive AI bill that is expected later this year, but we don't know if it's gonna happen. There are some voices that are saying that it's not gonna be a case for now, and still kind of it's unpredictable, to be honest with you. I wouldn't rely on, maybe this way, on that forecasts, but I would kind of try to be as prepared as possible and to keep that in mind. Okay, so about the Gulf and the GCC itself, this is a very interesting aspect. So when we were talking about the region, like European Union and so on, we think about the Middle East as well, maybe there is some sort of one legislation, one kind of approach to regulations. Not really. So basically what it's interesting, it is that every single company in GCC is having their own regulations and their own way approach of how they approach compliant regulations, and they are mostly on the soft law now. They have national strategies, they have some guidelines, they have approaches of how to ways of approaching AI. The most advanced is Bahrain, who is having already dedicated AI law. There are some that are trying to kind of have, at least in the public sector, to have more strict regulations. But what is interesting in the GCC is actually that it is a free zones aspects, free zones, let's say, approach that it might be the best when you want to enter the Gulf, when you want to enter the GCC region. And the easiest way to get there would be through the free zones, as they are operating on their own frameworks, and they are quite often they were modeled on English common law, international standards, and so on. So choosing the free zone to enter, like it's a good idea to start. Especially as I said, in the public sector, the GCC sees, like, that basically the public sector is super important, which means that actually what is driving the change and the regulations becoming much harder, and better discussions on how to structurize and how to actually make the regulations properly, is the procurement itself. So if you are trying to win some great businesses and enterprise clients, procurement is something that you will be definitely the most restrict, like with the regulations itself. They are very fast, they are moving fast, they're having lots of discussions, and they understand the importance of AI development and having the regulations in place. So that's definitely. And last but not least, we have the United States, as I call it, the home of AI without an AI law. It is a busy slide. I can send you later on also the slides, so you can kind of like dig deeper into it. But what is important with the US is that they don't have a federal law or framework at the moment. There was the Biden's AI safety order, but it was revoked by the Trump administration. And then in March 2026, the White House released a national policy framework, but it's not a binding law. It is like a set of legislative recommendations. So it is still kind of like a discussion to be taken in the States about, like, how to regulate AI from the holistic perspective of the whole country. And because of that, it's missing all the states, well, not all, but pretty much. There are many states who are kind of stepping in and kind of trying to fill the gap. And there are three of especially prominent and imminent in that terms. And it's the Colorado AI Act, and it's the Texas TRIJA as well, and California. And these three of them are very regulations that people are following the most, let's say the most comprehensive, the most not, I don't want to say sufficient, but they're most recognizable, and other states are really kind of following their regulation, the most mature, maybe this way. I lost the word. There is also like the NIST. It's not a certification, it is rather like a methodology. This is a voluntary framework, but it's growing the legal ways. It's growing actually the importance of it. And it is sort of like from a national perspective. It has 4 functions, like govern, map, measure, manage. There is no auditor, there is no certificate, but what's important, the Colorado and Texas have written it into state law as a safe harbor, which means that you demonstrate compliance with it, and you have a legal defense if your AI causes harm and so on. So I think, for US, I feel sorry for the companies working, operating there. And if you are thinking about moving and opening your business into there, you have to take into consideration that you need to follow those regulations state by state for now, if you want to operate with the data of the users. But you can also kind of help yourself with those international standards, and especially like if it's states, you can think about the SOC 2, but you can also think about those ISOs 42 and 24 and 27K. So this is the 4 markets, an overview. You have all the information here about what it's UK, EU, GCC, USA looks like. And entry complexity, the most difficult is for European Union, of course. But the other ones, especially around a strict hard regulations, it's still a question mark, although some national strategies, some principles well already raised. In my opinion, companies should know about it, and they should follow those regulations. Of course, not like what can you follow if it's not yet written, but like, be already aware of what's coming and try to align to whatever it's there already. So that's that. In terms of the practical next steps, and we're almost at the end, about the practical next steps, what can you do for your product and for your organization? What can you do for your product? You can map your AI system, sit down and kind of like understand from within your organization how many and what AI systems you're using, because it means that you're not necessarily a company whose AI application, right? That you are actually, your product is itself, but you might have also be a provider, you might be a deployer, you might be using from within your company other AI systems that might be also important and relevant to incorporate into your compliance. Identify your risk level. So try to respond to whatever is required by checking whether you fall or not into the risk level, especially we're talking now about the AI Act. Try to document from day one. There's nothing worse than coming for an audit that of the products that are already on the market for like a year. I'm telling you, the retrofitting of the compliance is so difficult, and because it has an impact on so many things within the organization. The most ideal is to have the audit by design, as I call it. So like, just that you have design the AI governance and AI compliance from within before you launch. And that's the ideal state. And always remember, like, that you have to have the human oversight into architecture. So never leave AI on kind of like looked after, let's say this way. So yeah, that you need to have the possibility and availability of interfere, override, and be able to stop the AI always. And that's the most important aspect of it. For your organization, just assign somebody or find people who can talk and be aware of the AI governance in your organization. Sometimes companies are too small to have a dedicated person per se. Quite often, bigger companies already are recognizing that. I'm not saying that it's always right, like, to have a separate person, but it is helping a lot. Choose the priority of your jurisdiction. So like, if you are scaling, if you're thinking about different markets, think about jurisdictions first, like, because what it requires from you will also might also design your product pretty much. Audit your data practices before the regulations come. As I said, lots of regulations are really reactive and they are incident based, but like AI Act, for example, it's different. It's preventive, so it might mean that basically you might need to answer questions before you even want. So like, be prepared for that, and have the board conversation, have the AI risk discussions. Like, it must be on a high level and a lower level, but it may not be sort of slip through discussions or we just send it over to legal. It is not that simple anymore. So that's all. What I wanted to say is that this trust can, like, this discussion on compliance it's all about building the trust, because as I said, like, this is not by declaring it. It's the decision that you're making around AI. And so I hope we have some time for questions. If not, please feel free to DM me. You have the QR codes for my LinkedIn account and also from for my newsletter. Where I write about AI ethics and AI audits, and my recent kind of articles as well, where they're about like who should govern, who is accountable for AI in the company, for example, or what the trust is. So if you feel like reading a little bit more, I highly recommend, or like say, please check that. Please feel free to contact me at any given point. You have my email here as well. You can contact me through LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions that you may have. I'm always happy to share. Yeah, and that's that. Thank you.